Greetings and welcome to Chapter 5, Innovation and the Future. One of my favorite classes in my PhD program dealt with the diffusion of innovation. As you begin your media management, you need to think about who you are when it comes to innovation. Are you adventurous and willing to take at least calculated risks? Then you are probably an innovator. Do you like to do your research and then jump in? You are an early adopter. Or are you more deliberate? Do you move slowly, weighing the pros and cons, and then move forward? That makes you an early majority, as opposed to the late majority who are much more skeptical. You likely don't move until almost everyone else has, and you see that you might as well. Or are you stubborn, traditional, almost unwilling to change? That makes you a laggard. All are important in the innovation process. Because of the nature of their business, media firms are constantly looking for new technological innovations to help them get their message out, to produce content quicker, and to save money. Desktop publishing programs such as PageMaker, QuarkXPress, and InDesign replace the old literal cut-and-paste method of designing and laying out a newspaper or magazine. New software such as Premiere, Final Cut, and even iMovie and Movie Maker have made film editing much easier than the old method that required an X-Acto knife and Scotch tape. On the one hand, this is an exciting thing. Where big-time networks like ESPN and CBS Sports bring multi-million-dollar trucks and require 30 to 40 people for a production, we use a TriCaster system that costs $65,000 and can realistically be operated by 5 people. On the other hand, this streamlining can cost people their jobs. Typically not good for morale. But then again, because it is cheaper to purchase these units and because it does not require as many people to operate, it does open opportunities for entrepreneurs to go out and start their own small business. As a media manager, you need to consider the impacts of innovation. Now newspapers can go online versus simply print. Radio stations can provide video content. Television stations can provide the news package and a long-form story. Films go straight to DVD or Netflix. This, of course, impacts how consumers will receive the content. As a newspaper editor, for example, you need to consider your audience. If you are in a rural area with lots of readers who are still on dial-up, you may want to reconsider all the video content. And because of new delivery methods, you may want to reconsider the content itself. If filmmakers don't have to worry about ticket sales because of subscription services, they may be more likely to provide unrated content or director's cuts. All of this, of course, will affect your business model. Who will sell what and how? Which editors will you keep and which will you reposition? With which vendors will you do business? All are questions you must consider. In 1962, E.M. Rogers developed the diffusion of innovation theory. He pointed out that innovation for innovation's sake is pointless, an idea further supported by Jim Collins in his Good to Great study. If you are going to innovate and utilize technology, make sure it is advantageous and will help you grow the organization. Rogers also pointed out that you are obviously going to have to get your employees on board, some of whom will be reluctant to change. This is where your champions come in, those who support the idea and will encourage its implementation. As a media manager, it is critical you don't just run headlong into the innovation. You are first going to have to develop a vision and a strategy for implementation. You are also going to have to be resourceful and patient. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. Managers may take a structural, technological task, or socio-technical approach when deciding whether or not to innovate and introduce new technology. In the structural approach, media managers determine if the innovation will have an impact on the company's structure. For example, when Twitter and Facebook became the rage, college athletic departments had to decide if they were going to hire social media managers and to whom they would report, and if they were going to have to develop new policies and rules to govern the use of social media by administrators, coaches, and student athletes. Technology doesn't always have to involve the actual media either. It can also be a way of tracking employee hours and activity, thus improving production. Again, though, keep in mind that if the technology doesn't apply to your media organization, don't do it. Time clocks in media organizations can be pointless because of the odd hours reporters, filmmakers, and editors work. If this is the case, why add the time clock? In the technological task approach, media managers consider how the new technology will impact workflow and thus productivity. If the innovation makes the product better and makes production more efficient, it is worth considering. This may allow for jobs to overflow into other, once separate areas and jobs, therefore changing the structure of the organization. For example, one-man bands in television have become very popular because of the new cameras and lighting systems. Cinematographers can also edit. Technical directors also can operate graphics and video playbacks thanks to systems like the TriCaster. But because of this, you may also have to deal with some resentment employees who don't want to do multiple tasks or who believe they are now doing more with less. The sociotechnical approach considers the technology and employees as one. They interact for the benefit of the organization. In this approach, media managers examine the purpose of the technology. Is it so the production may be better quality? I think about when we shoot a newscast. Because of some of the innovations we've implemented, we can now do crawls and more green screen segments. The purpose of the technology is to make the production more informative and professional. But it is then important to recognize that this may cause angst among some of the production. It is therefore critical to plan for how to get team members on board, how to allay any fears, and how to train. Naturally, as a media manager, you first need to identify if there is an actual need for the innovation. No sense adding a newfangled printing press if you are going to only publish online, now is there? You also need to determine if the technology you are going to add is going to solve your problem. This is what we call putting the round peg in the round hole. And it is going to be important to integrate the new system for what you already have while also looking for unintended consequences. For example, when we started running UCM TV, our campus cable channel, through our studio, one of the consequences was that we had to hire a graduate assistant to help with programming because all video files had to be converted, loaded, and programmed. This became too much for our engineer or me to manage ourselves. As with any change, you may, probably will, find some trepidation on the part of your workforce. This may require some persuasion where you demonstrate the relative advantage of this technology over the status quo or another technology. You demonstrate how it is compatible with the existing system, and you examine how easy or difficult it will be to implement. You then need to try the new system and monitor the results before you make the new technology a part of your standard operating procedure. A word of caution here. I had a business accounting class when I was working on my PhD. The one great takeaway was a thing called sunk cost. Say you leap in and decide to go guns a-blazing with this new technology, and you spend a lot of money to purchase it and a lot of resources to get your people trained. You then discover after implementation that this technology does not do what you wanted it to do at all, and in fact makes you more inefficient. It is going to be easy to say, well, we have to stick with it. Look at all the resources we expended getting it going. This is a foolish way of making decisions. You've already sunk the resources into this piece. You cannot get them back. Hence, a sunk cost. Whether you keep the technology or go another direction, that money and time is already spent, so don't consider it when making future decisions. Just learn from your mistakes. Here's a visual of Everett Rogers' 5-stage innovation decision process as published in his text, Diffusion of Innovations. The innovation diffusion process is the process through which decision makers pass from first knowledge of the innovation to forming an attitude toward the innovation to a decision to adopt or reject to implementation of the new idea and finally to confirmation of this decision. Notice that prior conditions must be considered as we discussed in Chapter 1, Managerial Decision Making. This will help in the decision whether or not to innovate. Also notice in the knowledge phase that it is important to understand these key characteristics of the decision-making unit. And finally, as you look at the persuasion phase, recognize that whether the innovation comes from top-down or bottom-up, you're going to have to convince others it is the right approach. This is what we talked about on the previous slide. Also notice that in the decision phase, you have two choices, adopt or reject. And notice that as you move from implementation to confirmation, that this was the right choice, you continue to make decisions. If you decide to adopt, as you move through the 5 phases, you will either decide to continue using the innovation or to discontinue it. Again, remember what I said about sunk costs. If, however, you decide to reject the innovation, you may decide later that it was either a good idea or a bad alternative and thus decide to adopt. Or you may, of course, stick with your decision and never adopt at all. So far, we've been talking about innovation as in using new technologies or ways of getting our message to the audience. You may also innovate and bring a new product. As a newspaper, you may also want to start publishing a monthly special interest magazine. If you work in public relations, your organization may develop a new widget that will revolutionize the industry. Keep in mind then that you'll have to develop a strategy and plan for implementation, which is going to require surveying the market and what your competition is doing. It is also going to require a lot of organization as you take this research and go through the innovation process. And of course, you are going to want to have a vision. Where do you want this product to take you? How is it going to affect your business? What are your goals? Keep in mind that you may need to create a new brand, or you may want to extend your brand into new areas. As a university, we went from being a brick and mortar campus at Warrensburg to having the Summit Center in Lee's Summit to the Innovation Campus to having online classes. Not necessarily in that order. Our University Relations Office brands each differently, but they each extend the UCM brand. External impacts will also need to be considered. How will it affect the competition and your relationship with it? Are there boundaries in the market? It wouldn't make much sense for a film studio to try and open here in Warrensburg now, would it? ESPN thought a lot about revenue alternatives when it recognized it had conquered the sports TV world. How else could it raise revenue? Well, through radio, magazine, regional channels. You get the idea. These external impacts have helped ESPN continue to grow its brand and popularity. Consumer behavior is also critical to consider. This is why you don't see a lot of upstart newspapers right now. Newspaper readership is on the decline, so why would you want to start a new print-only newspaper? And finally, advertising and promotion must be considered. A, do you have potential advertisers, sponsors, or investors? And B, can you have advertisers? For example, when we sell advertising, we can sell advertising for our web streams, but we cannot have advertisements on our cable channel. We can have sponsorships, however, on the cable channel and on the web streams, so we go with that. This figure comes from your text and is a good visual of factors influencing the adoption of innovation. Take note of the different media types and the internal and external factors they must consider. And of course, as a leader, you must consider how innovation is going to affect your personnel. They are going to have to be able to adapt, which may require some training, and thus added expense. And to do this, they must be willing to learn. If they are not on board, you're going to have to decide whether to ditch the idea, persuade your personnel, or move forward with whomever will join you and say goodbye to the rest. Finally, take a look at this chart from Rogers. It considers the independent variables, on the left side, as they relate to the dependent variable, organizational innovativeness. The plus signs mean if the independent variable is positive, it supports innovation. For example, if the leader is inclined to support innovation, there's a better chance of the organization innovating when necessary or desirable. The minus sign means if there is little of this independent variable, the possibility of innovation is good. Organizations that do not have a centralized formal structure that is very top-down with many layers are more prone to innovation. So there you have it. As you become a media manager and you look to innovate, keep these things in mind.